Welcome to The Chemical Show, the podcast where chemical means business. I'm your host, Victoria Meyer, bringing you stories and insights from leaders driving innovation and growth across the chemical industry. Each week, we explore key trends, real-world challenges, and the strategies that make an impact. Let's get started.
Welcome back to The Chemical Show, where leaders talk business. I am continuing my conversations reflecting on 2025 and what to expect in 2026. Today, we are talking talent. I'm bringing to you guys today Lisa Brantley, who is the head of client consulting and executive search for the Americas for Mercuri Urval. Lisa's got decades of experience working with executives across energy and chemicals and other value chains, and really identifying talents and trends, playing matchmaker between leaders and companies, and more. So Lisa has boots on the ground, hundreds of conversations this year, lots of executive searches, so she knows what's going on. Lisa, welcome to The Chemical Show.
So nice to be here, Victoria.
Yeah, glad to have you. So, Lisa, just provide a brief introduction to yourself and who you are.
Sure. Well, title-wise, company-wise, Victoria did a great job on that. Mercuri Urval, we are a global retained search firm headquartered in Sweden. So I share that because a lot of the work that I'm doing here in Houston is for companies that are working and growing globally. So my focus here is specifically in the Americas. So we work with South America, US primarily, as well as Canada. And we help organizations here. I help organizations here identify leaders, CEO, heads of business units, presidents, head of sales, HR, technical, IT, consulting, operations. So these heads of functions and heads of businesses is where we spend most of our time.
Awesome. Love it. So 2025 has been quite a year in many, many ways. And, when I talk to different people across the industry and other recruiters and search firms and stuff, it's been quiet and yet busy. You seem to have been really busy. Across the industry, we're seeing a lot of ups and downs and changes. But what has really stood out for you when you think about leadership and talent and job placement?
For 2025, it's interestingly been probably one of the busiest years I've had in my decades in search, and my 25 plus years in search. This has actually been one of the busiest years. I think even though we are seeing some movement back in the job market, right? We're all hearing about layoffs and restructuring and consolidations and all these things that are percolating and the issues that are happening. There's still an opportunity. Anytime you see transition in the market with respect to search, many companies see that as an opportunity. So we're seeing a lot of positions that are really, if I could use one word to describe the searches that we've had this year, it's been really transformation. Companies that are hiring leaders to come in and grow a business, a new segment, transform. Of course, AI, digital transformation is a key priority, particularly in the chemical industry. So we've had a busy year. There's a lot of opportunity. At the same time, I would say I've probably received more outreach from executives who have been reorganized out, actively looking. So it's really a picture, I think, of the market. And one of the things that we see is these 25, 30 plus year leaders and the less than 5 years of experience professionals is where I think the greater challenges are. And so then you have this sort of space in the middle, but the biggest challenge is many of them don't have the commercial fluency or the sort of cross-functional fluency to really be successful. So it's a really, really interesting dynamic because we see so much transformation around, supply chain, digital, AI, all the things. But if you really look inside of these companies, the people that they're trying to sort of enable to step up into those roles are really lacking those skills. So, so I think what will happen is, as a result of that, is we'll see more companies bring in consultants. So these people they're going to have this moment of, oh my goodness, we really can't do it. We need help. And so I think all of these professionals who have been sort of organized out will see coming back into these companies on special projects and things like that to help them because they've got the industry know-how, the expertise, the maturity, the cross-functional experience needed to be successful. So I think that's probably one of the biggest surprises for this year that I've seen in the market.
Yeah, and Lisa, that makes a lot of sense to me because, of course, we do see the chemical industry in particular, and I think this is true of some other industries, is in a prolonged downturn, particularly for commodity chemicals. We're certainly seeing some of that in specialties as well. There's a lot of changes. There's also discussion that the playbook that's working right now and that leaders are pulling out, they're actually dusting it off, right? So people that are 15, 20 years of experience may have never actually executed in this environment.
That's right.
And
Well, really no one has. Actually, if you think about that,
fair
right?
enough.
If you're thinking about the dynamics with respect to, because, we've had downturns, you've had, cost pressures on more things that are more commoditized. But what's interesting about this dynamic is the pressure around transformation, digitization, where if you look at the chemical industry as a whole, you might say is behind. Looking at other manufacturing sectors, looking at other energy organizations. And so the gap is larger.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you can say the expertise is even smaller. So if you look at like engineering, for example, fresh graduates, graduating college with a chemical engineering degree, which is oftentimes, these are the professionals that come into the company, build a path, move on to the commercial side, run a business, right? And they have the path up in the organization. 1 in 40 engineers are chemical engineers. Only 1 in 40.
Yeah,
Then
that
you
doesn't surprise me. Mm-hmm.
Well, and then you add to that the other industries like pharma, ESG, different green energies are competing with the chemical industry for those chemical engineers.
Yeah.
So then you also have this dynamic of a gap and maybe attractiveness, we'll say sort of attractiveness of the industry for someone coming out of college with a chemical engineer. Do I want to go to work for a traditional chemical company, or do I want to go to work for a company that's over here in the renewable side, focusing on some specific type of technology that's related maybe to the chemical industry, but not directly? So really interesting dynamics kind of on both ends of the talent spectrum.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
As we head into 26, which is right around the corner here, what are the signals that you're seeing regarding hiring, right? And how are companies preparing for 2026?
I think most of the hiring for 2020, I think the hiring will continue. It's going to be more focused on, again, transformation and growth, and not, we've got someone that left, we need to bring someone else in. Because if anything, you've seen that these organizations of all sizes are sort of streamlining their leadership structure, right? So if you had a VP or a C-suite and a SVP and a VP and a director, and you had all these layers, they're simplifying those leadership layers, reducing costs. But again, you've got a big gap there. So I think there's going to continue to be more sort of focused specialty hiring. I think we'll also see companies in the chemical industry. I mean, I'm hearing a lot about growth and trying to capitalize on AI, capitalize on data centers and the different chemicals that might be needed for that. So I think we'll continue to see companies move there, which will create opportunity. But the other side of that, and I think one of the greatest challenges is, with all of this AI and digitization and information that's available from a search perspective, I think for our clients, it makes hiring, when they're doing their own hiring, even more challenging, because they've got to navigate through all the noise, all of the people that in the influx, and everybody that ever thought they wanted to have a chemical engineering degree that applies for the job, is heavy. It's a heavy load. So I actually expect from a search perspective that we'll be as busy next year. Very specialized, very focused searches, and focused on experience, but more focused on transformation, sustainability, leadership capabilities, and these things that have always, of course, are part of bringing in a leader or an executive. Right. But I think now even more. So we'll
Yeah.
see more. I'm having more conversations. It's coming up earlier in the interview with candidates, that they're diving into their leadership, what they do, how they work cross functionally. And if I were to think about that with respect to a gap,
Yeah.
it is that cross-functional capability. So when I talk to executives and CEOs about their leadership team, and you think about, I mean, over and over across manufacturing, industrial, chemical, it is this lack of ability to move sort of cross-functionally and commercially across the organization.
Yeah.
And
You know,
so,
what's so interesting about that to me, Lisa, is I feel like certainly across my career, which also spans decades, so don't mind the decades word. um, but we've moved from being a generalist versus a specialist seems to come and go from being in favor, which also, you know, when we ask people to be more specialized and be experts in whatever they're doing, it can often be then we lose some of those cross-functional skills and the ability to work across. Is that what you see?
yes, we see that. And I think one of the big recommendations, if I were to line up a group of, 50 CEOs or 100 CEOs or however many, they asked what's one thing you would do around talent, right? One
Yeah.
thing you would do, and it would be develop that cross-functional commercial acumen earlier on. Earlier on, give them exposure, teach them, help them understand, even from a technical perspective, how what they're doing impacts the business,
Yeah.
impacts the bottom line, impacts the customer. And I know that's very challenging, particularly in larger organizations, because you've got more streamlined functions, right? Here's my job, here's my box, here's my lane. Smaller mid-cap companies can navigate that, I think, a little easier, because you can establish mentors and
Yeah.
have more broader, sort of more broader exposure. But I think developing that skill set earlier is quite critical. And then we look at then this big gap in, because of the economy, and how many, if you look at the chemical industry as a whole, I mean, it's not been in a heavy growth mode. I mean, sort of post COVID, to recover from COVID like everybody else did, but it's been quite flat.
Yep.
And so there's not been as much of an investment in that younger generation. And so
Yeah.
we can train, and I guess I'll talk about that maybe a little bit more in this conversation, because we can train our leaders, we can equip them, you can give them a coach, you can, but it really needs to start at the bottom. It needs to start those first few years. It needs to start with prioritizing. We had a client that's in the petrochemical industry that's hiring a head of sales for their U.S. operations. And one of the pieces of advice that I gave that client was, okay, let's get this position filled, and then you need to hire someone 2 years out of school with an engineering degree, and you need to build a track for them to take your job in 5 years.
Right.
And because here he's sitting with a whole sales organization, a team of people that are doing a good job, but no one to take his job. Right.
Right.
And so we see this sort of succession gap. So I think as we go into next year, I'm hoping we'll see a bit more of visibility from these executives on succession planning, enabling, within their organization to equip these leaders to run businesses
Yeah.
and lead initiatives.
That's a great topic. And in fact, succession planning is one of the topics that has come up and will be part of the Chemical Executive Mastermind as we go forward into 2026, particularly because one of the leaders who's participating has said, this is what I'm working on, is figuring out who backfills me. And what does that look like in the organization? But the thing that you said, Lisa, about, sometimes you find that maybe cross-functional experience is sometimes easier in small companies. I also would say sometimes it's harder, though, because they don't necessarily have, or they don't feel like they have the capacity to just have a role that's not directly focused in delivering on something, but instead is there to learn and grow. And I compare this sometimes, and I have these conversations with people. Like when I was at Shell had a lot of people that you could pull into a room and you can have a collaborative conversation, and there was enough room to be able to have a few extra buffers to develop people. Whereas when companies are feeling stressed, when they're really cash motivated, which they are right now, it can feel difficult to give yourselves the leeway to bring that person in early, or to give somebody the extra 20% room in their goals that's just about learning something different, right? And so that's, I think it's a need, and leaders recognize it, I hope, but it also can be a challenge because of this tug of war between cash and performance today versus performance tomorrow.
Well, and the reality is, to sort of further add to that, is people are being asked to do more than ever. And so, and it depends on again, it depends on the leader. And maybe my comments were more centered around if you've got a CEO or a president of a division that's really on board about it and understands the power of succession planning and mentorship, then it's probably might be a little easier to navigate. But again, if we think about the last 24, 36 months, it's pressure about supply chain. First, we had the issue of, can we get our products? Can we get what we need to manufacture and make what we need to? And then the pricing, and then the tariffs, and all the dynamics that are going. And then, of course, the added pressure of AI and transformation and digitization and such. So it's definitely a challenging climate, whether it be a large company or a small company, to make that a priority. But I think if we look at the growth, if we think about the growth in the chemical industry and where we're expecting growth will continue to come up again, right? Later we'll maybe see the predictions of later in the 2028, 29, 2030. Okay, well, who are you preparing within your organization for that next phase of growth? And I know that's challenging when you've got all the fires of the day, all the priorities, all the dynamics, but the companies and the leaders who can do that and do that well will be better positioned for that growth.
Absolutely.
Because if you think about, I'll use an example of when sort of the Sarbanes-Oxley came out many, many years ago. I mean, none of these companies were equipped for it. No one was. And it was such a pain, all the growth in that segment, all the needs, the deliverables with the kind of the sheer volume of people they needed. They weren't available. And so it was really challenging. And so had that been known before and companies could have prepared, it would have been a lot better. And so here we are, we know that there's growth on the horizon. And so what are these leaders doing to prepare their organizations outside of the fires that are in front of them today to be ready for that growth?
Right. That's really good. So Lisa, I know you do a lot of work globally and with global and international companies. And we've had this conversation before. There seems to be some different considerations or trends or understandings of how the job market in North America differs perhaps versus other regions. Can you touch on that a little bit and what you see? Because obviously, again, you're playing in a global market with a global company and global considerations.
Sure. There's actually so much around that question. That's a great question. I would say one of the biggest challenges that we have working with Europe, for example, but it could be another region, but particularly painful with Europe, is the disconnect we have between compensation in Europe versus compensation in the U.S. Our salary ranges are 40 to 50% higher than Europe. And so when you have these companies that have, even if they're large in the US, but they're headquartered in Europe, will have challenges with salary bands and requirements. I also find that my European or companies outside the US are more narrow with respect to their profile. So I feel like a lot of the leaders in the US working for US companies understand that, okay, I'll use chemicals as an example. This role focuses on distribution, but hey, someone on the manufacturing side that's maybe worked with distribution companies could be sufficient. Whereas maybe a company that was in Europe that was looking for a role here might say, no, we have to have this. And so I think it makes recruitment more challenging, the scope more narrow, and then we're also have the added challenge of compensation. I think in the U.S., companies understand, hey, the whole recruiting cycle and what you need to do to attract people and get people and bring them on board. They know what they need to do, and it's challenging. And a lot of times European companies will send someone from Europe to lead the business in the US, and then they're trying to navigate this as well. And in many instances, we placed a head of sales for a manufacturing company recently, and I think his compensation was higher, much higher than the chief commercial officer in the headquarters. And so that's a dynamic that we manage. Also, I would say timing. I think what it takes to recruit and attract someone here in the U.S., we need a little bit more. Our U.S. candidates want to be behind the mission. They want to be passionate about the industry. So not even just specifically the industry as a whole, but also what they're doing, what they're about, who they're reaching, who their customers are, what their sort of ideas are on social sort of dynamic. So all of these things have to align well for our U.S. candidates. Whereas I feel like sometimes when we're working with European, I'm recruiting on a position right now in Europe, it's very, very different. For they know the company. I'm even at the executive level. I'm interested. I like it. It's maybe a little cleaner. I think our U.S. candidates need a little bit more courting, purpose throughout the process. So those are some of the things that we see.
Is it because there's greater variety? I mean, and I think, is it also because, if we think, so let's just say you're comparing interviewing for a candidate in the U.S. or the southern part of the U.S., let's just say the Gulf Coast states, versus interviewing for a candidate in the U.K. or France, the geographic boundaries are different and the variety of options seems to be different. Is that part of it?
I think so. I think, but it's part of an opportunity here in the U.S., but it's also part of a challenge. Yeah. So we can recruit in countries that you could put 3 different European companies inside the state of Texas, right? And so if you think about the city of Houston, I'm recruiting for a position in the Netherlands right now, and we were laughing about the commutes. They can move all the way across the country in 2 hours. Well, in Houston, we can move all across our city in 2 hours. So it's just a very different dynamic. Also, they do move from country to country easier than we do here. So there's maybe some opportunity there because they can, you can be in the Netherlands and recruit in another nearby country that could be attractive. But there's just so many people. So we are navigating more interviews, more people, more evaluation, and our U.S. companies, we need to move faster. So if you look at the pace with which the expectation to go from executing a search to getting to the finish line, it's quite tight. It's rapid. It's quick. Whereas some of my European clients will move slower. And then you lose candidates. You have challenges there. So it's very, very, very different.
Yeah. Okay, Lisa. So that hits on, and I'm going to just go through a couple of questions quick because we're going to run out of time. What's the average time a search takes, like from start to finish? What do you typically see if there is a typical?
We would typically, our timeline is 90 days.
Okay.
But realistically, I would say it's about 120 days. Just, when we go out to the market on a position, we're not posting an ad. I mean, we are going out and fully mapping the market, understanding all the key companies, the key players, who are the people within these organizations that we would want to talk to. So once we've done that, then we start the outreach process. Then we interview, 40, 30, 40, 50 candidates, and then we create a pipeline, and we move the candidates through that. So it takes a little longer, but it's a full look at the market. Yeah. It is evaluating all the competitors and customers and people who are selling to the same customers or whatever that dynamic needs to be. And then we build a pipeline, and then we take those candidates through the process. Okay. And then when you think about executives traveling and all that, it just ends up taking realistically about it.
All right, next question, because people always want to know this. Where do you find your candidates? Is it all about LinkedIn?
It is all about LinkedIn. Only, as much as I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with LinkedIn.
Yes, do we all?
It is a great tool. And really, when I started in recruiting many years ago, we would get these lists and these companies, and you could do all this research. But what it was interesting to see as time evolved, then the last time I think I went out to a company to potentially pull lists and such, I think all of their data came from LinkedIn. Okay. And so once we got there, it was quite clear. LinkedIn is the tool. It's what's expected. Each recruiting firm is using it. It's the only one place that has the most current data. But there are people outside of LinkedIn, so we have to be open.
Yeah. How complete should somebody's LinkedIn profile be? Like, should they be replicating their resume on LinkedIn, or should it be different? What makes you stand out when you're looking at LinkedIn?
I think you will get all kinds of different answers on this question. It's a great question, different answers, different people. I think most people don't have enough information. And the people that put their resume on it, I actually would not recommend that. I think
So
you
don't
want to
attach the document.
don't attach it, and then but they'll fill it in like with the executive summary that's on their resume. They put the executive summary. Probably on LinkedIn, it needs to be a little shorter. You need to make sure you're hitting keywords, different business lines, and then yeah, maybe 4 to 5 bullets under each position.
Okay.
And that's sufficient. And as long as your customers, your size of business, things like that are there. I think that's important. But what I would say to people, and this is for their LinkedIn profile, and this is also for their resume,
Yeah.
people need to be able to quantify results. And I can't tell you how many times I've been working with a top performer, executive level, or one level down, and how many times I request, I need you to go back and quantify this for me. So I don't think people are often thinking about that. They're thinking about their experience. I managed sales for this side of division, or I managed a business size this size. But what did you do? What was the impact of your role? What did you do? How did you streamline processes? How did that impact margins? How did that grow revenue? What are those metrics are? You've got to be able to quantify. So I would rather see someone's LinkedIn profile have less information, but actually show me that there's impact than have, 20 bullets that tell me all the things they did.
Got it. That's helpful. Super helpful. Okay. So if you were going to define 2026 and your expectations for talent in 2026 in just 1 or 2 words, what would it be?
We're expecting growth. I think there's still going to be opportunity. I think there's still going to be growth. I think the candidates that are more experienced, I think, end up coming back in on an interim basis and helping these organizations. So I think there will be a big growth in that sort of interim leadership space. Companies will continue to hire leaders, more specialized, more focused on maybe a specific area that they want to grow in, or and then combining leadership, transformation, digitization, et cetera, to that. And I think that we'll probably still see some gaps on the lower side. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to repair itself immediately, but I would challenge a leader who might be part of this discussion to think about, okay, who am I building up in my organization to prepare myself for what we know and what we hope is going to be ahead in the next 3 to 5 years.
Fair enough. Okay. And so my final question for leaders that are contemplating a move in 2026, and they're thinking, I think 2026 is my year to get a new role, leave my company, get a promotion, do what have you. What should they be doing right now to position themselves for the future before they even start a search?
Yeah, great question. I think going back to what we talked about with respect to LinkedIn and their resume, I think quantify. Spend some time thinking about the impact that you've had on a business, on an organization, so that you can very clearly articulate what that is and be able to quantify that. And then, of course, that's going to flow into your resume when you get there. It's going to flow into your LinkedIn profile when you get there. And then I would say, secondly, relationships are always the cornerstone of any kind of growth, whether it be career growth, whether it be I'm wanting to grow in my business, I want to grow sales, I want to expand what I'm doing. It's always relationships. So I would always say, work on the relationships internally, navigate that, build, grow, enable other leaders, support other leaders, work cross-functionally well. But then also in your personal network, I think it's hard. We get busy. We worked with someone 5 years ago. We had a wonderful relationship, or we were in front of a customer that we really liked, or we went to an event and we met someone that we really connected with. And we thought at the time, I should stay in touch with that person, and then didn't. And so I think investing and spending time to be intentional about your network, staying in touch with people, inside the organization and then also outside the organization.
Yeah, love it. Great. Lisa, thank you. Thank you
You're
for
most welcome.
taking time to share some insights. I know that people are always interested in their own careers, their career growth, their career trajectory. So this has been super helpful. Thank you very much.
Well, such a pleasure.
Thanks. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Keep listening, keep following, keep sharing, and we will talk with you again soon.
Thanks for joining us today on The Chemical Show. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and most importantly, share it with your friends and colleagues. For more insights, visit thechemicalshow.com and connect with us on LinkedIn. You can find me at Victoria King Meyer on LinkedIn, and you can also find us at The Chemical Show Podcast. Join us next time for more conversations and strategies shaping the future of the industry. We'll see you soon.